Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. How well do you know your exes, and do you have any idea what they are really capable of? Often, even those people with whom we have lived for years under a common roof, we can never fully get to know. The scariest thing is that when they break up or after it, they can show their worst qualities and the darkest side of their soul, directing all the anger and hatred at the once beloved person. The story of Gladys Ricart is a true example of the realization of the American dream. An immigrant from the Dominican Republic, without money, connections, and language skills, in a foreign country, received a brilliant education and independently built a dizzying career, going from dishwasher to chief accountant of a large company. In relations with the opposite sex, Gladys has always been very cautious and selective, because in her youth, burned, remaining a single mother. As a mature, established woman, she seemed to have met a worthy man with whom they were alike in every way. But Ricart had no idea that this intelligent, stately, and respected man would become her biggest nightmare and cut her life short on her happiest day. Who was Gladys Ricart? Gladys Maria Ricart was born in 1960, December 19th, in a small province of the Dominican Republic, and was the youngest of 3 children in the family. She was raised with an older sister named Norma and brother Juan. Her parents worked hard to provide their heirs with a better life than the one they lived themselves. In the mid-70s, Norma, who was just over 20 years old at the time, emigrated to the United States and settled in New York City, where she was able to find a good job and establish herself. Gladys dreamed of following her sister's example and moving to America in search of a better life. She studied diligently at school and was one of the best students in her class. However, as a teenager, she started dating a guy from her school who was her first love. At the age of 17, she became pregnant, and the boyfriend, learning about it, refused to continue the relationship and simply stopped communicating with her. But Gladys immediately decided that she would keep the child and will bring him up independently, and her parents supported her in this. At the age of 18, she gave birth to a son, whom she named Davis. Gladys was still living in the home of her parents, who helped her a lot with the baby, while the young mother worked hard to save money to move to New York to live with her older sister. It took her almost 4 years, but even then, her savings were not enough to take her son with her right away. A new life in a foreign country. It was not until the summer of 1982 that Gladys realized her dream and flew to the United States. She settled in Manhattan, in the house where her sister Norma and her family lived. The girl immediately began to study English, and at the same time took on any job and part-time work, just to avoid sitting on the neck of her relatives and not to abuse their hospitality. Gladys washed dishes in the evening in restaurants, handed out advertising brochures on the streets, sorted and laid out goods on the shelves of the supermarket. As soon as her English level allowed, she went to college, continuing to work several jobs in parallel. After another year, she got a job as an accountant in one of the New York companies, and after graduating from college, the girl entered a prestigious university at the Faculty of Economics. By 1985, Gladys had a good and promising job that brought a stable income. She was still studying at the university, but she had already rented a separate apartment and was saving money to buy her own place. Now she could take her young son from the Dominican Republic, where he still lived with his grandparents, and move him in with her. After earning her degree, Ricart's career took a rapid turn for the better. She became chief accountant of a large travel company, the main office of which was located in Manhattan, was considered a first-class and indispensable employee. By that time, she had already mastered native English, and she even managed to get rid of her accent almost completely. After a couple more years, Gladys and Norma worked together to take their brother Juan and his wife and 3 daughters, as well as their elderly parents, to New York. They all settled in Manhattan and socialized closely with each other. The brother also found a good job, learned the language, and gradually advanced in his career. The children attended prestigious schools, and in general, the fates of all members of the large family were quite favorable. They kept in touch, came to help if any of them needed it, and knew everything about what was going on in the families of each of them. Perfect stranger. By the early 90s, Gladys had achieved just about everything she could dream of. She had a good high-paying job, she rented a spacious apartment in a good neighborhood, her son attended a prestigious school, loved ones were close by and did not need anything, and the girl herself with confidence in the future. Only to build her own personal happiness, she has not yet been able to. It should be noted that Ricart, after her first failed experience of relationships when she was left alone with a child in her arms, without money and education, now very carefully approached the choice of a partner. The young Dominican worked hard to provide a decent life for herself and Davis. She tried not to miss any opportunity, and all the time improving in everything she did. Colleagues, as well as many friends and acquaintances, Gladys considered her a careerist, and were almost certain that she would sacrifice personal happiness for new success in the professional field. She really rarely went on dates and was always more focused on work. Nevertheless, she never stopped dreaming of meeting a reliable man, getting married, having a full-fledged family, and being happy. Ricart did not have her own car, and always got to work on the subway, where one warm autumn morning she met the perfect, as it seemed to her man. It was 41-year-old Austine Garcia, who was able to charm her at first sight. He gave Gladys a seat, was polite and gallant, and when another seat became available, he sat down next to her, and they had a casual conversation. The man seemed witty, erudite, joked amusingly, and complimented her. In addition, it turned out that Austine had also once immigrated to America from the Dominican Republic, so he and Gladys had a lot in common. Before saying goodbye, the new acquaintances exchanged phone numbers to keep in touch, and from that moment on, their romance began. Who is Austine Garcia? Austine Garcia, as already mentioned, was also a native of the Dominican Republic, where he was born in February 1951. His childhood was difficult and full of hardship. He grew up in poverty. His native father never knew, and after the death of his mother decided that he had to radically change his life. In the mid-70s, he emigrated to the United States, and there he literally chewed his way to a happy future. The man worked hard, learned the language, and as soon as he got a little on his feet, began to actively help his compatriots, who, like him, moved to the United States in search of a better life. Austine, more than anyone else, understood how hard it is to get a foothold in a foreign country and to make a name for yourself. So he provided comprehensive assistance in finding a job, housing, learning the language, and so on. In the 80s, Garcia became one of the leaders of a large Dominican community in New York State. He was a prominent and influential figure, successfully developed his own business, and the office of his company was located in the central part of Manhattan. The man owned his own two-story house, located in an elite neighborhood, several expensive cars, and a yacht. He managed to be married but divorced, and now independently raised 2 sons, sole custody of which he achieved through the court. Garcia gained fame as a kind, sympathetic, and generous man, and since he occupied a prominent place in the largest community, he was constantly asked for help, and he did not refuse to help anyone. He was ready to personally receive and listen to everyone, and often even treated compatriots and their children at his own expense. In 1985, Austine became the head of the Dominican Chamber of Commerce in New York, and also managed several other large organizations associated with the Dominican Republic. At the same time, he was engaged in charitable work and carried out large-scale social activities. Thanks to his assistance, several schools and kindergartens were opened, as well as a training center for learning English and an employment center for the employment of emigrants. Usually, Austine never used the subway, But that day his car was being repaired and he was in a hurry to get to an important meeting. He wanted to use another car or call a cab, but the city was in a huge traffic jam and the subway was the only way to get to the place he needed in time. It was there that he had their fateful, though perhaps more correctly fatal, meeting with Gladys. She thought it was fate, but it turned out to be an evil fate. A slender, well-groomed woman in an expensive business suit immediately attracted Austine's attention. He decided to take the initiative and was the first to make contact. Almost immediately, they found out that they were compatriots, and both made a lot of effort to make their way in a country foreign to them. Austine asked Gladys for her phone number and left her his business card, on which he had also written his personal home number. Garcia had been thinking about the beautiful stranger all day, and that evening, when he got home, he called her. He invited her to have dinner with him at a restaurant that weekend, and she accepted without hesitation. The man seemed perfect in every way. He was kind, intelligent, well-educated, generous, courteous, caring, and listened attentively to everything she said. Austine behaved like a real gentleman, seemed very gallant and polite. In addition, their fates were very similar, because both were immigrants, started from the bottom, both had failed relationships, and now they were raising children on their own. The relationship between Ricart and Garcia developed rapidly. They called every day, and all free time tried to spend together. Austine beautifully looked after his girlfriend, gave her luxurious bouquets of flowers and expensive gifts, took her to exquisite restaurants, did not skimp on compliments. He quickly found a common language with Gladys's relatives and got along with her son. All members of Gladys's family were very happy for her and believed that she had finally found her happiness. Austine's children also accepted their father's new friend well, and a year after the relationship began, he asked Gladys to move in with him and live together. Ricart was over the moon. She and Davis moved out of the rented apartment and moved into a huge house, Garcia. But from that moment, the problems began. The man's sons from his first marriage, who lived with him, were older than Gladys's son and constantly hurt the boy. Teenagers systematically provoked conflicts, and sometimes it came to fights. Despite the fact that Austine's children were wrong and were always the instigators of disputes, the father in every situation took their side. According to the memories of Gladys's family, she at that time, more than ever, dreamed of marriage and waited for her boyfriend to propose. She begged her son to avoid conflicts with Austine's children, and the boy tried. But the Garcia sons enjoyed bullying him, so they did not give him a day's rest. Gladys realized how difficult it was for Davis, who was also entering adolescence, and she feared that the tension in the house would have a negative impact on his future life. So she decided to talk seriously with Austine, but he did not see in what was happening any problem, believed that the children themselves and everything will sort it out, and refused to influence the behavior of their children. After weighing the pros and cons, Gladys realized that she was not ready to risk the well-being of her only son and therefore decided to move out of Garcia's house. The man took to what was happening with understanding, but noted that he would not want to break off the relationship. He rented a separate spacious house for his girlfriend and her son, and the couple continued to meet, but the nature of their relationship was rapidly changing. Tyrant and possessive. Almost immediately after the couple separated and began living apart, Austine began to show signs of controlling behavior. He insisted that Gladys be in touch at all times, so he could call her home or office at any time and have her pick up the phone. The man also began to look at her surroundings, scrutinizing who she socialized with on and off the job. At first, Garcia was gentle but persistent. He questioned his friend in detail about where and with whom she was, what she was talking about, how her day was going, and so on. In other respects, however, their relationship was much as before. Austine, as before, gave his girlfriend flowers and jewelry, took her to restaurants, and took her to resorts. Ricard's family already considered him practically a member of their family, and she herself was still waiting for a marriage proposal. Years went by. Austine turned into a real tyrant and possessive, in every possible way limited Gladys's freedom, trying to control her every step. He was obviously not going to marry her. Gladys asked the question, and it became clear that marriage was not in the man's plans at all. He stated that he had already had a failed marriage, and so he did not want to marry again. Gladys hoped that Austine would change his mind and was in no hurry to end the relationship she had spent so many years of her life on. It soon became clear, however, that Garcia was having occasional affairs or flings on the side, trying to hide it from Gladys, whom he presented as his wife in high society. When Ricard found out about her boyfriend's cheating, she tried to break up with him, but he literally went berserk, pulled out a gun, and threatened to kill her rather than let her leave. At that moment, she realized what kind of monster she had been meeting all this time, and realized that she had to run away from him as fast as possible. But fear for her life kept Gladys from leaving for about another year. Only in November 1998, after Ricard, visiting the office of Garcia, literally caught him cheating, she firmly declared that now, between them, irrevocably, all over. The man did not try to justify himself, and did not believe that Gladys could really leave him. However, just a few days later, she moved out of the house he rented and also informed her family of the breakup. New love and the pursuit of an ex. At first, Austine made desperate attempts to get his ex-girlfriend back. He constantly called her and offered to meet, left on the doorstep of her new home bouquets of flowers, gifts, notes with declarations of love, and even a Bible. However, Gladys no longer succumbed to his manipulations and was not going to resume relations with him. In February 1999, Ricard met in one of the popular restaurants with a man whose name was James Preston. He was also an accountant by profession, and his free time devoted to his hobby, writing music. A mutual sympathy arose between them at first sight, and soon they began dating. Gladys had no idea that her ex was still following her closely and literally looking in her windows. One day, when James and Gladys were spending time together at her house, there was a knock on the door and Austine stood on the doorstep and demanded to speak to her ex-girlfriend face to face. When she refused and asked him to leave, the man went into a rage and started throwing stones at the windows. Frightened, Ricard called the police but did not press charges against Garcia, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. In the summer of 1999, Preston offered Gladys to become his lawful wedded wife, and she willingly agreed. Wedding couple decided to play on September 26th, and after going to Hawaii, arranging a honeymoon on a paradise island. The lovers began to prepare for the celebration, invited friends and relatives, and it seemed that nothing could prevent their happiness. On September 12th, 2 weeks before the wedding, Gladys went shopping at the mall. There, she ran into Austine, who was following her. He put his arm around her waist as if they were still a couple and offered to escort her. Knowing her ex's temper, she didn't resist, but quickly remembered the urgent matter at hand and hurried away. A brutal murder on the wedding day. On her wedding day, Gladys was the happiest bride, clad in the lush white gown she had always dreamed of. Dozens of friends and relatives gathered at her home in Ridgefield to share in the joyous moment. The groom was waiting for Gladys at the church while she finished her final preparations and was about to leave for him. 2 professional photographers were working at the house, and several video cameras were set up so as not to miss anything important for the future family archive. Soon, however, the footage was being viewed not with the family, but in the courtroom where the murder case was being heard. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a car driven by Austine pulled up to the house and stopped on the opposite side of the street. A man got out and headed toward the house, but was blocked by Juan, who asked him to leave. Garcia, however, said he was invited to the celebration, so the bride's brother backed off. As the happy bride was handing out bouquets to her nieces, Austine entered the room. He went straight to Gladys, grabbed a .38 caliber pistol from his briefcase, and fired 3 shots at very close range. The first bullet hit her in the shoulder, the second in the chest, and the third in the head, leaving Ricart no chance of escape. The bride died on the spot, and the medics who arrived could only state her death. The killer didn't even try to escape, and was apprehended at the scene. He looked calm and seemed ready to confess, but he was not remorseful at all. Perpetrator or victim? During the first interrogation, the male detainee admitted that he did not know about Gladys's wedding. Moreover, he was allegedly sure that he was still dating her, because a couple of weeks ago they were walking around the mall in an embrace. According to Austine, he drove by Gladys's house every day, and that day, seeing a large number of people in cars, he decided to stop and wonder what was going on there. When he learned that his friend was marrying another man, he decided to talk to her and went to the house. According to him, in the living room where the bride was, he was suddenly attacked by her brother and son, and he pulled out a gun to defend himself, but the bullets accidentally hit Gladys. Garcia, however, claimed that he did not remember the shooting. When the detainee's lawyers arrived at the station, he retracted his initial statement and kept silent. He was offered to admit his guilt and cooperate with the investigation in order to receive a lighter sentence, but the man refused. This high-profile case was taken up by the best human rights defenders who sought to win it at any cost and make a name for themselves. The best defense is, as we know, an offense, so experienced lawyers decided to make Garcia look like a victim in this whole situation. The trial was scheduled for October 2001, so the defense had plenty of time to prepare. Since the image of a good man created by the businessman collapsed in an instant, and in the eyes of others he was now a real monster. To restore his good name seemed difficult. The lawyers immediately started working with the press, giving interviews and organizing press conferences. They worked on several fronts at once, making Gladys look like a greedy woman and a cheater who had broken Augustine's heart. At the same time, the lawyers claimed that their client was attacked by the brother and son of the deceased, and Garcia grabbed a gun to defend himself, but accidentally fatally wounded his ex-girlfriend. According to human rights activists, the deceased had an affair with James while still in a relationship with their client. Allegedly, she deceived Garcia, planning her wedding behind his back while continuing to accept gifts and money from him. According to them, the murder was manslaughter, occurred in a state of passion, and because of the attack by Juan and Davis. As soon as this information was actively circulated in the media, the public sided with the perpetrator, believing that Gladys got what she deserved for her cheating and abuse of Augustine's kindness. The victim's family came forward to defend her honor, but the perpetrator's lawyers seemed to have gotten their way. The murder was caught on videotape. On what was to be the happiest day of Gladys's life, photographers and a videographer were invited to the celebration. They filmed every moment of the bride's preparation, and in the living room there was a camera that recorded the last preparations. It was this camera that captured the gruesome moment of the massacre of a defenseless woman. Garcia, blinded by rage, clearly did not notice the camera. The footage showed him walking towards the bride, grabbing a gun from his briefcase and shooting her 3 times at point-blank range. All the arguments of the lawyers collapsed like a house of cards because next to the criminal was not Juan or Davis, who allegedly attacked him, and he himself moved confidently toward his victim and aimed only at her. Upon learning of such important evidence, Augustine's attorneys began to insist that the tape should not be shown to the jury. However, the judge, after reviewing the tape, denied the defense's motion, admitting the video to the case file. Trial and a fair verdict. Gladys Ricart's murder trial began in the fall of 2001. Relatives and friends of the victim claimed that Austine stalked her after their separation and tried to poison her life in every possible way, but she, because of her soft character, did not report him to the police, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. The decisive argument in this case was the same videotape, which dispelled the last doubts. On February 1st, 2002, Garcia was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of being eligible for parole after 30 years. The man tried to appeal, claiming that he was shocked after learning of Gladys's wedding, which led to temporary insanity. However, his appeal was rejected. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.